I'm going to dispel the myth of Audi supremacy with this absolute pile of junk 2011 Audi A4 2.0 four-cylinder turbo that a customer got suckered into buying. The customer was owed money for work he did. Guy wouldn't pay him. Owed him thousands of dollars. But then he says, I got this Audi here and it's worth $14,000. If what I owe you when you give me $6,000, $7,000, I'll give you the car. So the guy does. First, big mistake right there. Now, he didn't know me at the time, so he took it to various other garages who screwed him over, had him sit for months, and it never ran right, so he towed it over here. Gives me the key, and when I try to start it, when I put in the stupid keyless ignition, nothing happens. There's no lights. So, I'm going to have to jump it. And it's problem number two. We got to jump start the battery. So we open the hood, over we go, we'll open the hood, and guess what? There's no battery under the hood to jump start it. Now the battery's in the trunk, but there's no key and nothing to open the trunk with. Oh, but look, there's a button you push to open the trunk, but the battery's dead, so the trunk won't open. This is a true catch-22. You gotta jump start the battery in the trunk, but the battery's dead, so you can't get into the trunk. Brilliant Audi engineers, they thought of everything to lock you out of your own car. And I got a jump pack, and there's a positive terminal under the hood I can hook it up to. As you look, there it is. Positive, hook that up to the positive. Now we got power to the positive, and we'll put the negative over here on this nice post. That's what it's made for. There, and we'll turn it on. We got 85% battery power left, so let's go back and pray. We push the button, the trunk opens. Success! Aha! Now we can get to the battery. Oh, there's no battery. Oh, there's not even a battery in the car. No wonder it didn't start. Like I said, this baby's been to 2 or 3 different mechanics, didn't know what they're doing, screwing around. So now we'll put a battery in and go from there. Well, at least you can't blame Audi on this one. They do put batteries in when they make them. This is negative ground because it bolts to the frame. And the other side says positive. So that means this one's the negative. We'll hook it up. So we'll put the negative on and tighten it up. 10 millimeter. That's tight. And we'll do the other side. Let's pray I can start it up and pull it in the driveway and figure out what's going on with this clunker. Well, here goes nothing. Well, unfortunately, that's what we got. Nothing. The engine won't even crank. It just clicks. Well, let's check the battery. Now, the customer supplied the battery, so let's see if that's a piece of crap, too. At least it opens the trunk. It's got that much power, so let's hook up the battery tester. Positive to positive, negative to negative, and we'll test it. This particular one has 900 cold cranking amps, so we'll set this for 900 cold cranking amps. So it's 900, and we'll test it and see what happens. It's testing it. Says it doesn't have much. Isn't that typical? So we're going to try to jump start it. It's supposed to have 900 cold crankings, it's less than 500. So we're going to jump start it, see if that helps. So we'll get out the big guns. As you can see here, this baby can do 200 amp engine start, which is what we're gonna do. Click, click. So we'll just hook the cables up, positive to positive, negative to negative. But now plenty of power, we'll let it go about 5 minutes with this. Then we'll go back inside, see if the stupid thing will start. Cross our fingers this time. Nothing, same clicking. It just clicks, but it doesn't start. Which I kind of thought anyways, because even with 500 amps out of the 900, it should have cranked the engine. The engine won't even crank. This is one pile of junk. Now, since all it does is click, either the starter's not working or the engine's locked up. So let's go under and check. So what we're gonna do is get a long extension bar and sockets and see if we can turn the engine over by hand. So we get the socket and we're sticking it on the front of the crank. The crank's right here. And we're going to try to turn it. And what? No, the engine is locked up. So there's no point in going any further. I can't spin the engine because the engine's locked up. Pile of junk. Man, did he get ripped off. Now, I do have to say I was wrong when I called this a rolling pile of junk because it doesn't roll anymore. It's just a pile of junk. So we'll close the trunk for one last time. When you see A4 2.0T, that's 2-liter 4-cylinder turbo engine. Don't walk away, run away from one of those cars. I have never seen a used one that didn't burn oil or have the engine lock up. In this case, the engine's completely locked up. But when I check the spark plugs, they're coated with oil, so it was burning oil before it blew up, but now it's locked up entirely. And basically, this beautiful looking car, I gotta say, it's black and shiny, nice interior, but it's pretty much worth salvage value. Now, they are marvels of modern engineering when they actually work and run and are zippy with their turbos, but when the engine's locked up, they are just a pile of junk. So goodbye, Audi. I feel sorry for the guy who got it. Somebody owed him thousands of dollars. Then he made my customer pay him thousands on top of that to take this car that's now worth maybe $500 now. This is not unique for Audis. It's actually quite typical for one that's 10 years old. And you might say, Scotty, it's only got 87,000 miles on it. Well, in this case, that's all she wrote for this Audi, with a little bitty 2-liter turbo that the engine said, I think I can. Gee, I guess I can't. But at least now, understand, run away from these cars, especially used. Do not take them as payment for a debt where you have to give people money too. Now, he probably would have never gotten money out of the guy in the first place. So if he would have gotten a car for what was owed, at least it wasn't the insult that he gave him extra money for this rolling, or should I say, stationary piece of junk. 1998 Saturn. Now this one's still on the road, but barely. The transmission's starting to go out. Theoretically, they were supposed to be revolutionary cars. Saturn touted they wanted to be your car company, but really, it was just a spin-off of GM. They had interesting new stuff, such as plastic fenders, plastic doors. You can see the paint comes off of plastic pretty easy though. As you can see here, the paint on the plastic is crap, but the roof is metal and the paint's still good on the roof. Now, they were pretty much economy cars, no arguing that. They had a reasonable sized trunk. Now, these were pretty inexpensive cars. This one originally was about $10,600 brand new, but for about $3 grand more, you got a 4-door Toyota Corolla. An infinitely better car than this thing. That was one of the problems. But the main problem is, they were made by General Motors, but they made a special factory. Truth be told, originally, they were better made than GM. They started to have a little bit better quality, but over the years, GM pulled a bunch of shenanigans. I really feel they're kind of guilty about the Saturns were better than their other GMs, so they started doing stuff like pulling people off the Saturn assembly line and pulling people off the GM assembly line and making them work in a different factory, and it led to quality control being garbage for these things in the latter years. So if you had a 1991, not horrible quality. But if you had a 2002, the last year that they made these things, they were pretty junky. This one's in between. It's a 98, but it's closer to junk than it is to good. I'll show you under the hood. Not too powerful engine. It still does have metal. At least it's not plastic. They had AC compressors that broke all the time. That's pretty typical. And at least it still has a transmission dipstick, so you can check the transmission. But the engine only puts out about 120 horsepower, so it's kind of a dog with an automatic transmission. I've seen these with standards. They were relatively decent cars to drive, but with automatics, they're pretty slow. But the real problem with these cars, and especially the transmission, is it's one of these early electronically controlled transmissions. They are absolute garbage as they age. This particular one is starting to go out. Now, being a mechanic, I can tell that just by driving the thing, but I looked at the data for the transmission. I found all kinds of problems with it. As you can see by the orange data, the torque converter system's slipping. That's going out. And you can see all this bad orange data for the gears, the problem the gear system is having, the clutch aren't filling right. Basically, the transmission on this baby is on its way out. For a car like this, it might be worth $500. Not something you want to get involved in. To completely rebuild one of these electronic automatic transmissions, anywhere from $3,000 to $4,000 and up. Friend who does automatic transmissions, that's all he does. He used to be president of the North American Automatic Transmission Rebuilding Association. One time I sent him a customer, then I asked him, because the customer didn't want to spend it, they just got rid of the car. I asked him, I said, well, how many of these have you ever actually fixed? And he told me one. It was a guy's father's car. His father was dead. He was sentimental with the car, so he spent it to fix it. But he said everybody else said, I'm not going to put that money into that pile of junk. So he only did one once. And he said he didn't really actually make all that much money because the parts were expensive and it took a whole bunch of time because it was the first electronically full controlled transmission GM made. And man, did they screw up on it. No, Now, on the other hand, if you found one of these with a standard transmission, I had a customer buy one of these things for 500 bucks, drove it 5 years, and they're still driving it around. Just make sure it's the 4-cylinder engine, and here's why. The V6 engines that they used were originally made by Honda, but they got in a shouting match that GM didn't want to have to buy the special Honda coolant for the Honda engines. They said, we have Dexcool, all the cars we make have Dexcool, so we're putting Dexcool in those V6 engines we buy from you, and Honda said, we won't sell any more V6 engines. So, what happened is this. You buy a later Saturn, it's got a V6 engine that GM designed. What a pile of crap. Neighbor had one, head gasket blew on it. They were just terrible copies of the Honda. Honda makes excellent engines. And they just made a crappy copy of themselves, GM, stuck it in, and they were horrendous. They blow head gaskets all the time. They had a lot of power, yes, but lifespan, very limited. Now when you look at this whole thing, you can see typical, the headlights are all faded away because they're plastic, the bumper's faded away, and like I said, the paint on the plastic part's all faded, but the metal part still looks good. And when we look inside, pretty much an econo box car, hand crank windows. It has a radio, this does have a tachometer, you know, and it's just an econo box car. Nothing to write home about, but nowhere near as reliable as a Toyota Corolla. Yeah, you would have paid $3,300 bucks more for the Corolla. Would have been a much better move than buying this thing new. Now being an econo box car, it's got a relatively cramped back seat, but it's big enough for the bear here. And really, style wasn't one of its points. Kind of a bland looking car. And you can hear weird solenoids going on and off for the power door locks. We'll see if it starts up. Starts up okay. Now we'll take it for a spin. Now when you put it in reverse, you can hear that clunk. Well, guess what? That's the transmission going out. When you take off, shifts like a junker. You can hear that thing slamming into second gear. It's on its way out. It goes again every time it shifts. And it rides like crap. The shocks are worn out. It never rode that good anyways. And not the greatest stopping distance either. But let's face it, that clunking in gear, this thing's on its last legs. Basically, I wouldn't put a nickel in this car. I'd keep oil and water in it. I'd drive it until it didn't drive anymore. And then when it stopped moving, I'd take the license plates off and abandon it. It's a 2020 Volkswagen Jetta. And as usual, I'm going to give you the truth. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Now, if you followed me for any length of time, you know I'm not a big fan of VWs. High expensive bills, a lot of plastic crap on them. Well, here is the absolute truth about one of these new Jettas. Now, I have to say, I've been driving around. It's a fun car to drive. It handles well, zippy enough. This one's got an automatic transmission. The steering is absolutely flawless. It has the lightest steering I've ever seen. It's electronic power steering. And they hit the nail on the head. The base model of this Jetta, $19,000 or so, it's about $700 cheaper than a Toyota Corolla. And this, of course, is the luxury edition, so this particular one is $28,000. They're not giving these away. This is the high-end one. But as an advantage, the low-end and the high-end Jetta, they got the same engine. And that is both the good and the bad point. It's a little 1.4-liter engine with a turbocharger on it and gasoline direct injection. It puts out 147 horsepower regardless of which version you buy. It's the same engine. Now, consider that this engine is a smaller displacement than the later model Beetles. You get the Beetle engine, it put out like 60 horsepower. This puts out 147 horsepower. So it puts out plenty enough horsepower for this thing to be zippy to drive around it. And in this case, it's hooked up to their 8-speed transmission. Since it has 8 speeds, they're closer ratio. So, take it you're just cruising along like I was on a highway the other day, and you want to pass a big semi. When you floor it, it's not the usual races up like mad to pass it. It's got such close ratio gears that it wasn't bad, and it took off quite quickly. They're fun to drive. But that same fun comes with a cost. Believe it or not, this little 1.4-liter engine, they went back to a timing belt, not a timing chain. If you know anything about late model Volkswagen engines, they had some problems with the timing chains breaking. So in this case, this 1.4-liter turbo engine, they went back to a timing belt. Now Volkswagen claims it's a very fancy belt. I see they cost about $183. And they say that it's a lifetime belt. That it's good for the lifetime of the engine. Well, whatever that means. Still, it is a belt. At some point in time, if you keep them, you're going to have to replace the belt. Or, since this is an interference engine, if you drove it a long way and the belt did break, the pistons will hit the valves, break them, goodbye engine. And you might think, oh, it's just a timing belt, no big deal. All right, the way this thing is designed, it's so complex. Mechanics charge well over $1,000 to change the timing belt on this thing. It isn't just that the belt costs 183 bucks. It's that it takes many hours to tear the engine apart to do it correctly. So it's an expensive endeavor. And although the Volkswagen engineers say it's a lifetime belt, well, yeah, the lifetime of the engine. When it breaks, goodbye engine. Check the warranty. Once the warranty's up, it's on your dime, not theirs. So they can say whatever they want about lifetime. As far as I'm concerned, that's no different than them saying that, oh, the automatic transmission fluid is lifetime. Because when the warranty's gone, hey, if the transmission goes out because the fluid got too dirty and started to ruin things over 100, 200,000 miles, they're not going to give you another transmission free. So you have to keep that in the back of your mind with one of these things. I believe these engines have been out about 4 years. I haven't seen any particular problems with them yet. It is fun to drive. I'm not arguing that. But something to keep in the back of your mind if you're one of those people who like keeping your cars forever. Me, I'd rather have the Corolla engine that's got a timing chain that might last 300,000-400,000 miles than a little 1.4 turbo with all that strain that's got a timing belt that they claim is lifetime, but it's in an interference engine. Now, if it would have been in a non-interference engine, you wouldn't care, because if it did break, then you just have to take it apart and put another belt on. But in this case, it's an interference engine with a turbo. So if you're spinning down the highway and that belt did break, goodbye engine. And in most cases, by then, goodbye car. Nobody's going to put that kind of money into one of these things. It is modern technology. A lot of companies are going to these smaller engines with turbochargers, and it runs fine when it's running. I would kind of guess from what I've seen of the ones that have been out for 4 years, if you're happy with 100,000 miles out of a car, it's not going to break before then. If you're going to keep a car forever, I kind of wonder about this design. But on the plus side, if you look in here, this isn't one of these everything's cramped in. There's the turbocharger. It's right here. You could bolt it on and off easily. To work on this thing, there is plenty of room. Because if you think about it, you put a little engine in it, this is going to have a lot of room. Speaking of room, let's check out the trunk. Nice deep trunk, no arguing. A lot of room in this car. It's got a big trunk. We'll check the back seat. Got some decent room in the back seat. I fit in quite well. A lot of room, it's comfy. You can squeeze a third passenger in. And as you can hear, it's a pretty solid construction. It isn't flimsy. Just realize that, yes, this thing was made in Mexico. They're all trying to keep costs down. Let's face it, labor's cheap in Mexico. They build a lot of cars in Mexico now. Just realize that Volkswagens have been making cars in Mexico for more than 60 years. They've been doing it a long time down there. They got a lot of practice, you know? But they've been doing it for over 60 years. It's not like they're newcomers to the game there. Decent looking car. Let's check out the driver situation. As you can see, it's relatively sleek inside and modern. We'll start it up. Starts right up. It has all the fancy electronic stuff in it. A cool clock with not just the fake analog clock, but the date too. And I really like their screen in the middle, this Volkswagen thing. I like it because you get all the information right in front of you. It's got a nice backup camera, but what I really like is your map. It's right in front. So when you're driving down the road, you don't have to look over to the side. You can look straight in front of you, glance down, and get your map. No longer getting lost by looking around. It's right there, and you can always tell the speed. There's a speed over there. We're starting to move. Look, it went 1 mile an hour, 2. Not a bad setup, really. If you want to play with the 8-speed transmission, you can put it to shift yourself. Then you can shift it up or down. You can see, there we go, M1, M2. But it doesn't have paddle shifters. This is more of an economy car. There's no paddle shifters. This is a luxury version, so it's got a sunroof. And now we'll back it up and take it for a ride. I'm nuts about the steering. This electric steering, not only is it responsive, but it requires almost no effort at all. Those of you with wimpy arms will love this car. It's got that 1.4 cylinder engine, little, but it does have a turbo. So what we're gonna do is floor it and see what it does. You can hear those wheels spin. It's geared so that it's got decent pickup. And being a modern Volkswagen, it really does handle quite well. I'll give it that. The ride, it's pretty much what you expect. It's not the greatest ride. The strange thing I found is that the front suspension isn't bad. It dampens pretty good. But the back suspension leaves quite a bit to be desired, as I'm going to show you. We're going to go over these speed bumps, and we're only going like 15 miles an hour. And you'll see the front isn't bad, but the back really clunks. We'll do it again. The back is much weaker than the front. The back suspension does not impress me. The front is good, but the back, a bit rough. But for a little bitty 1.4 turbocharged engine, as you can hear, it's a pretty smooth, quiet car. So it does have zip. It is a fun car to drive. How long is the zip going to last? That rubber-based timing belt instead of a chain in an interference engine. But if you've been wondering how Volkswagen sells so many cars, because they're somewhat lower priced, if you get the low-end one, you don't have to buy this $28,000 one. You can get a $18,000 one. They are zippy, they're fun to drive, and this thing got phenomenal gas mileage. Now, I don't know exactly how much, but check this out. Here's the gas gauge, and if you notice, it's pretty much on full here. I just drove it a little over the speed limit to the beach in Galveston and back, put on about 120 miles, and it's still almost on F for full. Now, of course, certainly not a luxury ride inside. My wife, who likes complaining about cars that don't ride that well, she didn't like it. She felt a little uncomfortable going to the beach, and it's only a 60-mile trip. Of course, she's driving her old Lexus that she likes, but it's not the most comfortable car in the world. There's no arguing that either. So now you know the truth about this Volkswagen Jetta. After all, they went from the timing chain engines that had problems to a belt. That's why they went to a belt. It's a new fancy kind of belt design, yes, but they did have problems with the chains in the original ones. That's why they've gone to belts in this particular design, which is kind of a rarity. Most companies are going the opposite way. And as the saying goes, only time will tell. We'll see what these things are like when they're 10, 12 years old. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.